We're going to move now to audit and then break for lunch. We may, my friends at UCF, we may be a few minutes early. I don't know whether that's going to be a problem, but we'll work. Evidently.
And go cook dinner.
You use your resources carefully, don't you?
And for people who, I don't know if anybody's interested in this in the audience, but my plan is on the board, when we start the Board of Governors meeting, is to try to go through the normal, everything on the agenda other than budget and finance first, and move budget and finance to the end, because that'll take the longest discussion. And that will be, and I think it won't take us more than an hour to do the whole agenda except for budget and finance. So that's my plan, if that affects anybody's lunch plans. Okay, Chair Parker, Audit and Compliance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me get my right notes up here, please. Ms. Maloka, do you want to, would you call the roll for me? I think this is the first meeting of the Audit Committee as it's been newly configured.
Okay. Chair Parker.
Present.
Vice Chair Temple.
Here.
Governor Carter.
Here.
Governor Caruncho.
Here.
Governor Frost.
Here.
Governor Kuntz.
Here.
And Governor Stavros. Chair Parker, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Manoka. First thing I'd like to do, and I'm sorry Norm is out of the room, but I wanted to thank Norm for his leadership and service as the chair of the Audit Committee. As I mentioned to you or just a second ago, this is our actual first meeting with the new members. It's actually my first meeting serving as chair. And so I'd like to start by thanking Norm for his leadership and certainly look forward to his guidance on some of the issues that we will be addressing. For the members of the committee, the second item that I'd like to address is actually the approval of the minutes for May 12, 2011. Do I have a motion, or I will entertain a motion whenever you guys are ready?
So moved.
Great. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Great.
Aye.
We're going to move on to the third item. I actually invited the chairman of the Audit Committee for Florida A&M Board of Trustees, Mr. Carl White, to come to us and update us on an investigation issue that was taken on by the university, based upon some interaction that we had with them. Mr. White is out of the country, and he, in fact, has asked Mr. Gibbons to join us to provide us with a summary of the corrective actions taken by A&M as a result of the findings of a whistleblower investigation that resulted last year. Among other things that were related to the list of findings, the former chief audit executive submitted executive summaries of audit reports that in fact did not exist. We've monitored FAMU's response to this matter and would like to afford the university an opportunity to report out on the progress and the steps that the university has taken to address these issues. So when Mr. White could not be here, he actually asked that Mr. Gibbons, who's FAMU's VP for Audit and Compliance, to come and actually update the board on the steps that have been taken with that particular investigation. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Gibbons to come to the podium and begin his presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
As a result of a whistleblower allegation that the Division of Audit and Compliance had not followed professional standards governing performance of its audit activities, the university contracted with the firm of Stiffen Spellman, which is a law firm, to investigate the allegations. The firm conducted an investigation and issued a report in November 2011 and reached a number of conclusions. They concluded that the division had presented some 15 audit reports in the form of executive summaries to the Board of Trustees when, in fact, there were no final reports to support the executive summaries. And then also that 13 of those reports had also been submitted to the Board of Governors. The second conclusion was that the division did not have a mandatory quality assurance and improvement plan in place, which is required by audit standards, that the division misrepresented to the Board of Trustees Audit Committee that audit reports were to be prepared in accordance with audit standards when they had not been. Also, that the division failed to conduct an adequate risk assessment as a basis for its audit plan for the 2011-12 year. And that of the 15 reports that had been submitted, there were 12 which either had substantive work done after the report was submitted, or that the work that was done did not support the reported conclusions. As a result of these deficiencies, the Board of Governors Audit Committee recommended in November that the university implement a corrective action plan that was to include a number of factors, and we'll just look at each corrective action plan and the university's response. The first has to do with authorizing an investigation that the division had not done its investigations in an objective manner and in accordance with professional standards. So the university had contracted with the firm of Ernst & Young to investigate this allegation, and this work is currently in process and expected to be completed by the end of this month. The second item is to approve the development of a new audit plan that's based upon a systematic risk assessment of the university's auditable units and to be conducted in accordance with professional standards. The university contracted with the firm of Accretive Solutions, which is a firm that specializes in enterprise risk management, and it performed a university-wide risk assessment to identify key high-risk areas within the university, and also did a gap analysis to identify where the division's policies and procedures were not sufficient to meet applicable audit standards. The risk assessment that was done by Creative Solutions was used by us to develop the audit plan for the 2012-13 year, and this audit plan was approved by the Board of Trustees at its June meeting. The third action item was to direct that new audits of the 15 departments, the 15 audits that were deemed to be substandard in some way, be conducted so that they adhere to professional audit standards. The investigation did identify 15 audits, and all 15 audits were evaluated to determine the benefit from reperforming the audits. Our evaluation disclosed that 7 of these audits would not be reperformed based on a number of factors, including that the reported findings and conclusions for 5 of these audits were either substantiated by the audit firm or even though the work may have been done after the reports had been submitted. And then there were also 2 of the topics that have been recently reviewed without findings by independent agencies, primarily the State Auditor General. For the remaining 8 audits, the university issued an invitation to negotiate, and we received 11 responses. We interviewed 6 firms and hired the firm of Ernst & Young to reperform the remaining 8 audits. And this work is in process and expected to be completed by the end of June. The fourth action item was to do a self-assessment of the university's policies and procedures that's focused upon the process by which the audit committee provides oversight to the Division of Audit and Compliance. So to respond to this, the audit charters for both the Division of Audit and Compliance as well as the audit committee have been revised to more closely align these charters in accordance with the model charter of the Institute of Internal Auditors. We also obtained and issued to the audit committee a report on audit committee practices and trends. This was just provided for information purposes. We've also discussed providing training to the audit committee members so that they can better respond to their responsibilities as members of the audit committee. And topics that we've identified that may be included in this training would include just a review of the responsibilities that the audit charter establishes and steps that they could take to meet the responsibilities, just how to better read and interpret financial statements, also to review laws and regulations under which the university operates, and also to cover how to understand risk management processes. The last action item was to direct that an external assessment of the Division of Audit and Compliance's Quality Assurance and Improvement Program be conducted within the next 12 months. And this is connected with the gap analysis that was prepared by Accretive Solutions. And that gap analysis identified the areas that needed improvement. Those were the areas where the division's policies and procedures were not meeting the audit standards. And based on the gaps identified and the corrective actions recommended, we have begun developing a quality assurance and improvement program that covers all aspects of internal activity. And we've taken these the following steps. We have reviewed and revised our operating policies and procedures so that we have an operating manual that is currently in use. We're in the process of developing checklists and standard work papers as aids in use in conducting the audit activities and providing training to the staff. We have established a policy that all work is to be reviewed by someone who does not actually do the work. And also we have established an internal process to include just some ongoing monitoring of the work that's done by the division. This is short of a full quality assessment review, but it would give some continuing input into how improvements need to be made. And we have scheduled to have an external external assessment to be performed by December 2013. We believe this amount of time is necessary to give sufficient time to implement the corrective actions and for work to be performed under the new policies and procedures before we have the external assessment performed. Our audit committee has also determined that even though a quality assessment review that is only required every 5 years, that we would be doing this more frequently until assurance has been provided that the division is operating appropriately. And just to summarize, just say that the university does recognize the benefit of an effective internal audit function and has implemented this corrective action plan that's provided some positive steps to give assurance that the internal audit activities are operating in an appropriate manner. And I'd be glad to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibbons. Are there any questions from the members of the committee or members of the board?
Madam Chair, if there aren't any from the board, just one. First of all, Rick, welcome to the job.
Thank you.
Rick and I had a chance to work together in several different capacities over the years. He comes to us from the State Auditor's Office, and I always found him, Mr. President, to be a man of great integrity and honesty and character, so you made a good choice in Rick. As stated, the last round of the investigation has unfolded with Ernst & Young. Has Ernst & Young given you any idea as to about when? I know investigations are over when investigations are over, but have they given you any idea about when we could expect their report?
They have discussed having the report to us by the end of June.
By the end of, I'm sorry?
End of June.
End of June? Okay.
So that's, well, a week and a half.
Thank you.
Mr. Gibbons, I too want to welcome you to the job, and I'm sure that that Dr. Ammons is certainly benefited from your great experience. I just had a couple of follow-up questions to your presentation. Can you tell me whether any high-risk areas were identified during the risk assessment or audit plan process?
The Creative Solutions report really just identified what they call just areas that are high risk to all big institutions. They were very broad. I think financial management and accountability was one of the areas. The information technology was another area. But nothing particular beyond that.
Okay. And I think you indicated that there was going to be some type of actual training for the members of the Board of Trustees. Has that been scheduled, or can you give me some idea about that?
We have not scheduled that. That came up at the board meeting in June. We talked about it. So a couple of the members of the audit committee requested it, and we're starting to develop and work on that.
Okay. I just want to ask, so it's something that is going to be scheduled, and you anticipate that something will happen at some point this year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I just have one final question. You noted that action number 4 of the corrective action plan included a comprehensive self-assessments of the University Board of Trustees operating procedures as they relate to the Division of Audit of Compliance. Were there any issues or concerns about how the University Board of Trustees provided oversight? Were there any issues or concerns identified about the manner in which the University Board of Trustees provided oversight during the self-assessment?
The issues that have come up relate to the fact, really just trying to determine what the audit committee what they should be doing. So there were some concerns raised as part of the self-assessment, and that's the reason that we are considering the training. As the members of the audit committee went through the responsibilities that are established in the audit charter, so I think some of them began thinking that they might want to know a little bit more so that they can step up the oversight responsibility, just to figure out what it is they need to do.
Yeah. Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I just want to echo that one. That is so critically important, I think, for the presidents around the room, and I know I was one. The checks and balances in place to assure that while it is, I suppose, impossible in this life to guarantee that you can never keep people from frauding or attempting to fraud others, that there be checks and balances in place that assure to the greatest degree possible that if people are shirking their responsibility, unintentionally or intentionally for that matter, on issues of such importance such as audits and investigations at a university, that it not take over 2 years to discover it and deal with it. Must have been a good approach they took for it to take that long, but I think that's our concern, is to make sure that the board members review their responsibilities and the system that they utilize to help guarantee that check and balance, to make sure that those things are looked at in the future. That makes sense.
Any questions at all? Thank you very much, Mr. Gibbons. I appreciate your time, and we'll be sure and let your audit chair, Mr. White, know that you did a good job of pinch hitting for him.
Thank you.
We'll go from there. I think the next item on our agenda is from Mr. Harper. Mr. Harper, if you would come, and I think we're on item number 4 about the annual charter, or where we'll address the annual charter revisions.
Thank you, Governor Parker. This is my first opportunity to meet with the audit committee at a full meeting. So I would ask you, in your packets, in the yellow folder is a slightly revised version of the Audit and Compliance Committee Charter. And if you will find that in the stack of paper that you have, it will make this process go a little bit faster. And I know everyone is ready to go to lunch, and with the Chancellor there, I'm sure I'm going to get the high sign soon to move forward quickly. You didn't hear that, though. If you can find that document, and while you're looking for it, I will tell you that the action item for the Audit and Compliance Committee today is a review of recommended changes by the Office of Inspector General to the charter. The Board of Governors Audit and Compliance Committee charter and the Office of Inspector General charter, collectively we call them the charters, demonstrate the board's commitment to accountability and, quote, articulates the powers and duties of the Audit Committee. And in addition, it also fosters a management environment committed to integrity, efficiency, and sound financial controls and accountability. The charter requires that there be an annual review to make sure that the particular documents are adequate to fulfill the obligations. When you have an opportunity again to read all of the provisions of the charter, of course it includes our responsibility to track trends and review whether corrective actions have been put in place by the universities who are primarily responsible for the operation and management of their universities, but it also includes several other duties and responsibilities. A brief digression from my prepared remarks. The charter was adopted in March of 2009. Governor Tripp was then chair of the Audit Committee. It was a cooperative and collaborative process that included several meetings with constituents from the universities, general counsel, vice president for administrative affairs, also obviously the chief audit executives. So as part of the process for the changes that we recommend today, we submitted the draft charter to that same group. We received some very, very good responses and some good thoughts. I'll mention one when we get to it. However, the primary change that we suggest is on page 4 of the charter, and I'm not going to read this, but that language, which should be in blue on your document, incorporates and encapsulates the discussion that the Audit and Compliance Committee charter had over several meetings last year. The Board of Governors has the authority when a university is unable or unwilling to deal with certain issues to send the Inspector General in to conduct an investigation. However, before you get to that point, the process that we had put in place meant that I, as Inspector General, would go to the chair of the board, to Chancellor Brogan, and conduct a preliminary review to see if that, in fact, was necessary based upon that review. So after much discussion, and also with due respect to the governance structure, but also the fact that the Board of Governors reserves the fiduciary responsibility for the overall management of the universities, we came up with the process. Now, while that's only 4 lines there, it incorporates the fact that during any time between Audit and Compliance Committee meetings, if there is a routine matter where it doesn't take that much due diligence in order to determine that the university is adequately handling that matter, and you've seen our annual reports, and that is the vast majority of cases, then the Audit Committee chair can accept that recommendation, always with the discretion to bring it before the entire Audit Committee, and always, and I see Governor Temple, always with the proviso that I brief the members individually. That process works. Now, in the Policies and Procedures Manual for my office is a much more detailed recitation of what I just said, but instead of cluttering the charter with that, which is a 5-page document, which I would submit has been effective up until this time, and we hope in the future, we just recommend this change. Are there any questions about that? The other 2 changes are very much what I would call minor, but they also add clarity. And on page 2 of the charter is a suggestion from one of our state university system members. The chair of the Audit Committee, of course, should preside at the Audit Committee meetings, but in her absence, we did not have anything in the charter that specifically said that the vice chair should preside. So that's one change. And then we made one slight typographical change on the first page. If you have any questions, then Governor Parker, I'd ask for the committee to review this and for a motion to approve those. This matter would then go before the full board as an action item for ratification of the changes.
So the better question is, if I want to make sure that the members of the committee have had an adequate opportunity to review the information and want to make sure they would feel prepared to offer a motion at this time, or would folks like a little more time based upon the fact that this may be not necessarily a first blush, but it's not that complicated, but go ahead.
From my point of view,
I've been briefed.
Perfect.
You sent the documents, and so I would move them, if
Perfect.
that's appropriate.
Sure. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Great, motion carries. Ms. Harper, I think you're up next. Let me go back to the agenda.
Yes, ma'am. Auditing standards and the practice of this committee have been that on a periodic basis, the Inspector General will report out on activities. During the briefings, I talked about some of those, but Governor Parker, you will recall during your tenure as chair, you once asked, well, what kinds of matters do we get involved with in terms of the complaints and matters that we open? So I'd like to just briefly review some of the activities, not all of them. As you already know that we are required by statute to submit to the audit committee, to the full board, and also to the chancellor an annual report that summarizes all of our activities. And in the interest of time, I'm only going to talk about a few of them. Going back to the question that you posed, what kinds of matters do we have to deal with in terms of investigative matters? And before I get to that, just a brief review of our audit-related activities. Of course, we're responsible for developing, based upon a systematic risk assessment, an audit plan. We'll be presenting that to this committee for review at our very next meeting, schedules permitting, but of course before too long. In addition to that, one of my primary responsibilities, since the Board of Governors is staff off and the office is subject to an audit by the Auditor General's office, is to act as a liaison with the Auditor General and the staff. We are in the midst of an operational audit by the Auditor General, and if I may digress just for a moment, Mr. Givens was a member of the team in the last two audits, so our staff have become familiar with that process. In addition to that, we, on a regular basis, receive complaints primarily from individuals who first went to the universities and discussed this matter with them or filed a formal complaint. And we then, on a standard operating process, refer those to the universities for handling. We looked at our numbers right now. These are subject to change until we have a chance to drill them down. We've opened approximately 40 matters during this particular fiscal year. The majority of those were complaints falling in these kinds of categories. We had something between 12 and 15, which alleged misuse of state funds. We also had about the same number, which alleged that some individual at a university had misuse of position, authority, nepotism, or something of that type, and some others in general areas. Again, our standard process is to refer those matters to the chief audit executive. If it's a matter where an individual has gone through that process, a report has been issued, or they still claim that something should be done, then that preliminary inquiry process that is now incorporated in the charter is undertaken. In addition to that, if I can follow the items on the, turn back to mine. We have a responsibility also to develop policies and procedures that will be in place, and so that when our quality assurance review conducted by the Auditor General takes place, so we have an operations policies and procedures manual. It's a robust document, which I will report out to you on, not in all 88 some odd pages, but it primarily tries to establish and demonstrate that we consistently follow standards in our audit and investigative activities. And of course, we prepare the OIGC annual report. Madam Chair, may I have just 3 minutes to point to one other document that's in
Sure.
Okay, good. In your packet, and this is just for illustration purposes, is something that we came up with during the last 2 years, which I would call a dashboard for the Audit and Compliance Committee's work plan. Now, I maintain work plans. I generally call them summary work plans that are much more robust and detailed. But if you can find that in your packet, I found mine. It's just an assignment by the chair so that there will be individual committee members that I can call upon during the lull between meetings and make sure that they are kept specifically aware of various items. This is just a format. I'm going to discuss this with Governor Parker, and at the next meeting with her imprimatur as the new chair of the committee, she will make some assignments about particular areas. Of course, oversight and review of the complaints procedure and preliminary inquiries will be assigned to the chair or the vice chair or someone else, but we also have a responsibility to develop, as I said, based upon the charter and the statute, other documents, including audits and investigations and such. If you have any questions about any of the activities, the annual report will be on your desk no later than September 30th, and I'm more than happy to take any questions at this time.
Any questions for Derry? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I am interested in if you, I could not find my copy, Derry, but if you guys could take a look at that proposed work plan and document that Derry provided. Maybe you can send out an email to the committee members and see if you get any feedback on it so we can move forward with implementing the suggestions you have regarding different issues that we have to address as a committee.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I will do so.
With that, I believe, I'm scrolling down here. Do you have anything else for us, Derry?
No, ma'am, not at this time.
Item number 5? Great. We're now item number 6. I just want to, again, thank you, Norman, in your absence. We thank you for your great service at the committee, or great service as the chair of the audit committee. What's interesting about our work is that often it's only when we have problems that we kind of tend to really come together. So it's a good thing if you find that we're not convening very frequently. And without any other objection, I say our committee meeting is adjourned.
Great. What I'd like to do is break. We're going to break for lunch early. It's 11:45. Why don't we try to reconvene here in an hour, 12:45. All right. Thank you all very much.
Thanks.